and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am. So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video with me here today. This is a topic that I wanted to talk about for quite a while now, and it's just so important because we are in this very important time of the goddess as the life-giving force arising, liberating itself, coming to the full front in our lives, but also globally, in our humanity and our creations, our workings. So I've recently came across this video by, I believe the person is called John Lash. And it's interesting because elements of it I really like. They kind of match the Wingmakers material, which I talked about last year, especially towards the end of 2018, very intensely. Because remember, go a while back, right? 2018 began with information started to come through about the importance of artificial intelligence, dealing with artificial intelligence, what it is, learning to recognize it in ourselves, the patterns, the inception patterns, all of that, right? So the synthesis of the last year, which I transmitted to all of you through the Mastery of Inception and Mastery of Illumined Cognition course. It was a free course here on YouTube. It was almost like a graduation point for many souls who became aware of the subtle factors that are not truly of our human influence, because as you know, we like to say, oh, this is just how humans are, right? We managed to come so far. We're destructive towards our planet. We're destroying ourselves as a species, but also all other species. I'm subscribed to these petitions, and every day there's constant stream of emails about certain problems in the world and how we're losing species, every hour, every minute of the day, and how this reflects our own state of not recognizing ourselves as a part of nature. So in the Wingmakers material that I've shared with you, it was a very important facet of that material. It's not just about beings who are supposedly the evolving type, the futuristic type, the future self of humanity that have outgrown this current human condition and evolved themselves, transcended beyond that. But there's elements in that clearly state a certain infusion and a big, it's almost like inception that deals with artificial intelligence and races that have come into being in creation as a part of that intelligence, which is artificial. So in this video I recently watched, I think it's called Archon, Sophia, and Gnosticism from John Lash. It's an interview. You can watch it online. I won't go too much into the specifics, but it beautifully aligns with the so-called theme, the mystery, the ancient myth of the goddess. Because also this whole week I was working through the material of Neoplatonism by Manly P. Hall, 5 video series, amazing lectures, and it all comes down to this last lecture being about the myth of the goddess, of the primordial ancient goddess, and how one became initiated into that mystery and what it actually meant and how it was invoked in the psyche of a being who was being initiated. So now going back to this Sophia myth, right, which is a creation story. All races in the cultures of humanity have their own creation myths or creation stories. Even in the Bible, there's a creation story, but it was through the religious indoctrination and huge influence, which was patriarchal. But it's not just that it's patriarchal, that's much more behind this whole facet of life as we know it, that develops and strongly being presented at this time for us to resolve, to move beyond. It's beautiful. The sun just started to shine. We have cloudy. So it goes so much deeper into what's really behind it, but there's strong elements of life, of creation, that were either distorted or hidden. There's many books of truth that were destroyed, they were hidden as well. There are some different secret vaults, in places we don't know, as those of us who are of the collective, we feel intuitively. And in the Akashic field, the ethers, we can read a lot of this when we become illumined ourselves. We can tap into the mysteries. But in the ancient times, it was accessible or available to only a few who were able at that time to comprehend that. The times are changing now, because what's happening with our environment is so crucial that a larger amount of people needs to awaken to the truth of what's truly behind this. So there's many creation myths, like I said, even in the Bible, but they're not read as allegories. They're not read as archetypes. They've been distorted as in taken too literally, which brings forth a lot of fanatic behaviors, misinterpretations, and a huge amount, it's just huge, you know, of this distortion. So first it was the Christian religion, then even in the video they described the whole Islamic being, you know, even worse, this whole concept. So it's just worsening and worsening, and it's getting more and more into duality. But behind that is still a lack of understanding how life originated on this planet, because as you know, what's most hidden on this planet is how life came into being. The basic cosmic principles, you know, when I do my spirit drawings, I actually connect to that purity of spirit, which is known as immaculate design for life. Or when we say immaculate conception, it's sort of a little misleading, because again, conception, we think of it as in birth, a pre-birthing phase, right? A stage that somehow incorporates an element of procreation. But immaculate design in itself, the words are pure. Right? It's not about procreation at the human level, right? But it's a procreation of life that continuously comes into existence through the formula that is divine, this cosmic flowering of life, this cosmic blossoming and flowering pattern. So in these different stories of creation, there's elements of truth here and there. And everyone who studies something, let's say, more intensively, they will say, well, that myth is most accurate or closest to the truth, right? And people would resonate depending on the level where they are from that different vantage point. So there's many different angles of truth, but a lot of them distorted and corrupted, as you know. So how does one come into being, to crystallize, to refine within ourselves, to get this directly from source? So when I was watching this video about this Gnostic view of life and their own creative myth and Sophia, again, it has to be read through allegory and mysticism. So one has to have a certain amount of understanding of inner integration to not confuse this, because the New Age faculty will create a lot of distortion again. Okay, so even if you say, I'm agnostic, Gnosticism is a state of being that it requires constant presence, constant contemplation, observation. You know, I myself am agnostic, but I wouldn't describe myself, I'm just agnostic. It's what that faculty called itself to be, but the word gnosis means knowledge. So it's a knowledge of the root of the beingness, what brought us here, how we developed, and looking at all facets of life, not just those we love to hear. So in this video, it presents largely this concept of life. And as you know, I talk about this myself, how at the core of the galaxy, each core is where the origin, sorry, there's this interesting mist here. What is this? It's like, it was like a golden mist flying here. Wow. It was almost like a being manifested. It was a sign of a certain presence, because we don't have mist. And yet, oh, I think it was from these things growing now in nature. They're kind of yellowish, and then the wind comes and it's their dust. You know, with pollen, it's beautiful. It looks like a being manifested. It was almost like a sign. It was beautiful. Anyway, I have to go back to the story, because sometimes nature is just my nymph. It totally sucks me in, and I'm like, oh, I need to talk here to the camera and to all of you. So anyway, this myth, right? Part of it is a myth, but it's not just a myth. So we have to be very observant when we read a myth through what is true, what is just knowledge based on that's simply a cosmic truth. And when there's an allegory given to it as an anecdote or a story that will help us to interpret life from a non-dogmatic perspective, which is inscribed as in, you know, this is this version and only this, okay? So there is the core principles and then life which develops through them, and there's many interpretations that when life evolves, these interpretations will be used by various facets of life. So there's different humans now who would say, I resonate with this more and I resonate with that. But when all these angle points or vantage points are met, this is what we call synthesis. And in Gnosticism, the energy of synthesis, I feel, is very incorporated. It's very present. That's why the person who was in this interview, he says that in the Gnostic teachings, it's the most all-encompassing perspective of our origin and how life is created, but specifically being located our life here, Earth, right? This galaxy in our Milky Way. Okay, so in that perspective, that which is the cosmic principle. Oh, I was talking about my paintings, right? My drawings, how I bring that forth. And just tonight I had this dream saying, when I was saying to myself, my pencil, right? My pencil, it was so difficult. It was so difficult for me to put this into words, but I saw this pen, right? It's symbolic for what I draw, but it was about drawing, not writing. That it was placed above an arch, and then the words of my higher self came and they said, my pen is a doorway to the arch that serves into these illumined principles and Holy Spirit knowing. It was so amazing, and I just remembered it now. It was very profound, and just when I was thinking about it, that golden dust started streaming through. It was like a sign, right? It was beautiful. So anyway, the core principle of life is that from the core of the galaxy, right, it has its own pulse of life. Pulse of life is given there, right? So through the Gnostic teachings, they say that these beings who are basically archetypes of life, they're called eons in Gnosticism, and one of these beings who contributed to the creation of life here is Sophia, and the Gnostics know it as the Pistis Sophia. Some call it Sophia, I don't know, different people call different names, and then her counterpart. So they're sort of like essences of the masculine, feminine forces of life, but at the essence level, they're not gender specific. So these beings supposedly never leave the so-called core of the galaxy. They just reside there as these almost like forces of light. They're fields. They're very huge. Like, if we could call it energetic fields, is wrong interpretation. But they don't move out, right? So when life moves out into creation, it creates these rims, right? Different sectors or quadrants of what we call time-space continuum, but it's not really like that. Again, it's difficult to explain. But these arms of the galaxy, these spiraling arms, they will vary, right, in accordance to various galaxies we talk about here. But supposedly in Gnosticism, for our own creation here, we belong to this third arm of the galaxy and how our solar system developed. This is just one part. So in that second part, it's more about how life here on our planet was specialized, it was unique in terms of how it came into being, because the archetype, the essence we know as the Pistis Sophia, actually became manifested in form. So she left that core. That's how it's spoken about. But again, it's an allegory, which means divinity, right, became an impression upon the subtlety of what became matter, right? Source manifest. It's not like the goddess, you know, that essence can ever leave the space, because that space is the belonging nature of that core principle of life. So when we talk about the goddess, it's really a life-giving, a birthing principle. So now becoming aware of that facet, that nature within us, because the goddess left, right, that space, to become imbued in matter. In many ancient traditions, matter is seen as the daughters of men, which represents matter. And that which is the son of God really means spirit. And then together, when there's an infusion, there's an ensoulment process. So the souls, as sparks of life, imbue themselves in matter, so that they can eventually raise matter and lift it to the origin of their spirit nature. So life can become more and more refined. And there's different cycles of life where that occurs. So in that story, right, with Sophia moving and becoming imbued within Earth, being Earth herself, again, it can be read at different levels. And people would say, well, the goddess is now Earth. Well, the goddess here represents life. Earth is life, right? Earth is the principle of life, because life here is organic, not just inorganic, like in certain other planetary stations. So that's one aspect. So in this aspect, in the first aspect, right, which is beings at the core of the galaxy, which is the singing, the imbuing essence which moves out into life. And I talk about these as the pulse of life. And here at the level of the pulse of life, we know ourselves as source. We know the divinity of polarity as well, and how life is created from the triangulation process, and how from this pulse it moves outwards. I've been creating a lot of these cosmic drawings that once will be part of either oracle or book. They're still hidden. They're not the same drawings I do now, these spirit drawings, which are accessible to all of you, and they're on my page at the section called Holy Spirit. There's always new drawings added there. They're very spontaneous, but these drawings were specifically created at a certain period in my life. They're 33 in number, and they represent these cosmic principles of life. So when you know these principles, when your illumined nature is awakened to life itself, you will recognize in whatever myth, allegory, story, you will recognize what's truth, what's not. You will also learn to read it with the heart, which is the cosmic heart, because the distortions of the mind will be filtered out. And that is what leads us to the third level of this myth. But right, we talked about at the first level, we know ourselves as essence and the essence of all life. So when the Sophia, right, this divinity travels and she leaves the so-called center to move into matter and be fully present there so that life can be originating through that immaculate design, we know ourselves as offsprings of that, extensions of that divine force. So there's nothing outside of us that exists that is not of that essence. So this is when we start to awaken to the goddess nature as life itself, because the Holy Spirit is the essence of life itself, and Pistis Sophia is often equated with Holy Spirit. So that's the essence of life moving through. And in the third part, we have to know that this creation as a triangulation will always bring factors that are somehow not always predictable. So in this Gnosticism story, allegory, there's also a part that now in the New Age is talked about as archons, and these controlling almost like robotic beings who are part of AI or artificial intelligence that are inorganic. And basically, in many times they're presented through non-understanding that's complete, so through different facets, but the knowledge is not integrated. So there's just facets here and there, but the whole story is not given, which, as you know, we can only get through our own study, through our own deepening of awareness of the self. But in this myth, if you will listen to the interview which I share with you from that John Lash person, you will see there's certain elements that, if you have been following the Wingmakers material as well, they interconnect, because there's always a presence of artificial intelligence there. So we meet that aspect as the unpredictable factor in life through which we learn about the nature of what we are and what we aren't. So supposedly in that myth, there was, through the infusion of that liquid plasmic light that moved into where we are now, Earth, right? The becoming of the organic matter, the cradle for life, the Garden of Eden, right? This paradise. There also was, as a side result, an emanation of a race of beings or a type of being that is inorganic or inanimate. So I won't go too much into that, because again, the video I'm making here is not about that. And last year I spoke a lot about that. You can go there, you can watch the free course that I share with you. It was almost like a compilation of all this knowledge, all my knowing of Ascension, and how to transcend that, how to move beyond that. It was so important, and it still continues to be for beings who want to move beyond this, which isn't the organic self. You know, when we say we humans are so vile, we're terrible, we are like monsters, we're like beasts, ravaging the planet and, you know, plunging the planet, and there's this war for the planetary life force. Well, it's true, but where does this originate from is explained through this third part, right, which is the influence of this life, which is not organic in itself. So it exists in elements of the solar system, within the unanimated deities or the planetary stations that are not organic. So they have kind of like they're inhospitable for life in that way. Life does not develop as it does on Earth with such flourishing you know, essence. So here we will see that now this influence that we notice on our planet is partially because what's explained there as a programming of the mind, which happens telepathically. It's basically an energetic transmission. And it's almost like, you know, when people in the ancient past, people do research there, and they say, well, there's certain alien races, right, that created these hybrids because they've literally altered our DNA, the human genome. I've talked about that in the past as well. But here, I like this part of the video specifically because it talks about that this is not true, that they actually created like a nervous system distortion. So there was a filtering that occurred there. So the people started to receive these messages, and this is what was actually hijacked, not the DNA, As you know, the DNA, which means a design narrative, right? Divine narrative for life, is always, as the seed of life, it's planted in the hub for creation, which here in this case we talk about the central station, which is the core of our galaxy. And as you know, we're now aligning with the core of our galaxy, and it's becoming more and more. And I think now it is with the 27 degrees around this point of Sagittarius. So this degree is very important for us to work with, not just astrologically, but inwardly as an archetype, to liberate that. Because, you know, Sagittarius is that evolution of growth through expansion. So it's liberating the goddess from within that is now the step that's necessary. So in this third awareness about this, we realize that yes, there is such a theme as the Matrix. Otherwise we wouldn't have these movies. There wouldn't be such a strong uprising of artificial intelligence. We wouldn't be challenged in so many ways that we are now, because as human beings we're constantly sold information about how we are or how we're supposed to be, but it's not our divine narrative nature. It's not in our DNA. So what they've actually created, these beings who are inorganic, inanimate in themselves, it was more like an energetic overlay. So it was kind of like tampering with the nervous system, rather than, you know, they weren't supposedly successful in altering the DNA, because you can't temper at the basic. That's the beauty of life. You can't temper with it at its core design nature, at its core structure. The essence is there. At the essence level, nothing can be tainted at all. There is this divine design for life. You can call it immaculate conception if you want, but it always stays in that state of purity. So when you talk about the fall of Sophia coming into matter, becoming imbued in matter, it's not truly a fall, but it is simply an experience. It is therefore also an experiment. And for us to regain our awareness of life in itself, we need to regain the essence of what does the feminine force of life mean. What is the so-called embodiment? What is this imbuing of life into form? What is the birthing of life? Life in its organic state cannot be birthed otherwise, right? So if forms of life were meant to become self-thriving, self-evolving, as humans were designed to be, this aspect of divinity had to imbue itself. It's just how it is created. Therefore, this words, right, made in the image of likeness, don't just mean made like, you know, like copies, because in divine sense this truly is not like this, but it's of the exact offspring of that divine narrative for life, which is the core principle, sorry, I really have an itchy nose today, of the DNA. So anyway, I just can't stop, it's so itchy. Sorry, I have to shake it off somehow. So anyway, when we talk about ourselves more in terms of a loss of our empowerment and thinking, oh, our DNA was tampered with, we can't break through this, we're always going to have that as an imprint. Well, remember, it's just an overlay. It's an energetic overlay. Everyone can break free from it. You know, I don't exist in that matrix state. As I came into this human form, I had to rewire myself. I had to do the work, because this human inborn template didn't have all that I required from a state of my galactic mission. But think of it also in terms of viruses. You know, we talk about in biology these viruses that supposedly they just exist. No one knows their source. They're just always changing, you know, how they can invent new viruses. They are inventing new viruses all the time. But they're artificial intelligence as well. Viruses are not like bacterial life. So when a bacteria enters your space, and it's natural for us to have bacteria in our body. We have it in our bowels, we have it everywhere, right? But it assists our digestive process. It assists so many things in terms of having healthy bacteria, which was a part of the organic life. And if organic life was not tempered with the inorganic life, certain diseases that later develop wouldn't even exist. And what Spirit shows me is that there's actually beings here on the planet who have very high advancement level from the galactic position. And they've come here specifically, there's beings who only work with getting these viruses in their system and then reworking them from inside out. So that they're actually learning their patterns and through the intelligence of their bodies, because once your divine mind is attuned to this universal mind, your body's intelligence will naturally start to rise. It's, you know, it's all one. So there's beings who specifically have those missions. And from the outside perspective, it might look, wow, these beings have a lot of physical ailments and stuff they're going through, but they're working with a lot of this. And maybe some of you who hears that, it's a message for you. This cannot be in any way mistaken for you having disease in terms of not being aligned with your soul. This is not about that. Don't have excuses for that, because a lot of people want to find an easy way out or an excuse not to work with the integration of their soul. Integration means integrity. So when you're coming into harmony and alignment with your soul, the integrity of your body will also grow, which will make you naturally radiant, healthy, and always revitalized. And this is why the most important pathway for this is life force liberation. The liberation of Goddess can only occur through life force liberation. That's why all last year I've talked about that. I gave steps and steps. I think less and less people became involved in what I share, because people are basically not interested. They want easy access. They want to have answers delivered. No one wants to wake up to the world as it truly is. So you have a beautiful story, right? How life is created. You have a beautiful story of how the goddess essence moves into form, imbues all form, becomes imbued herself in this form. And the third part doesn't sound all that nice, right? Ooh, there's also this facet of life. Maybe we don't want to, maybe we just want to erase that part of the story. And actually, I believe it was, in many cases, removed out of the ancient scriptures, but it was written about. So I think this author has a book. I don't know. I don't know the author, though. I just watched this interview. And I think it's called Not by His Image, right? Not by God's Image. So this talks about, probably, I don't know, I never read the book. But in my own feeling, I feel this talks about that life, which is an artificial extension, and what we call the archonic or parasitic forms of life, which always have to feed on that which is essential, as in being organic, because it is an extension, an offspring, a direct offspring of source. So we're not just copies, right? And every one of us who was created that way, there is this, it's almost like sleeping or dormant divine design, this beautiful immaculate conception, that the awareness of it has been so distorted that people think, you know, through religious indoctrination, we're these powerless beings. Or the other version, it's also, I think, discussed in the interview, it's about having this inferiority, right? Or then it's the opposite is superiority complex. So this then is the fanatic expression of some beings over others. And this also is specifically indoctrinated through the principle of certain races that were the chosen ones, the chosen peoples. But they were actually chosen for this experiment, to have this wiring, this network, the nervous fusion that brought forth the inorganic perspectives, which now are becoming, as you know, very obvious in our society through people who act as leaders, but truly they have so many of these implants that actually go against life. Because who would be a true, honest, heart-based leader who knows the origin of life, who knows the origin of their divinity, and actually act consistently against it? To deprive ourselves, others as well, specifically others, of life, of that which is essential, because the life is the essence. So everything that is essential for life is being now taken away. And now everything wants to be reworked again artificially. That is a program. It's an inception. It's beautifully pointed out in the Matrix trilogy movies. It's just what it is. And there's people who are completely free of it. But still, you know, these people are few, and they usually come to share these missions. The next important factor here is that we have become, through this indoctrination system, so imbued in these cycles of life that are natural, because we're continuously being told through calendars how to work, how to think, when to work, how many hours a day you need to work. You're a worker bee, you're not a divine being. People are not waking up mostly to that fact, and I'm talking about the sleeping people who are still very much infected with this nervous system wiring that gives them the false impression of life. Therefore, the essence of life is actually being fed to them through that inorganic perspective and not the organic. So that was the part that was tempered with. And like I said, viruses are continuously being developed so that they would, again, debilitate the human bodies. And for us, it's sometimes challenging to work through a virus because, again, it's not natural to that which made us, to that which is our organic sustenance for life. So consider about that for a while. Think about that. Why, you know, there's a lot of truth already behind this. It's not just a myth, but there were certain viruses and are continuously being created to It's like biological attack people, but it's some way it's biological, but it affects your biological form, but from the perspective of what in itself contains, it's not biological at all, you know, viruses. You have to have a greater understanding, because in grade school or high school, they won't teach you those things. They will teach you about the nature of the virus, right? The log, the key, right? And how difficult it is for our bodies to figure those codes out and all that. So why we may have so many problems. But when we think about what's behind it, okay, where do they come off? What are they the product of? What is that which continuously creates things at that level? What has sustained them? So until we become intelligent in terms of knowing this is not biology, this is not what is of my divine origin, it's like creating your sovereignty, building it from within your own field. We're going to continuously accept that from the environment. And it's not just the wired telepathic messages that come through these encoded wiring system that has been like an overlay distorted, and it continuously debilitates our bodies, and the influx of our natural life force and the continuous flow of life that sustains us through it. Then, you know, there won't be true evolution and progress into that which really makes us natural and how life was supposed to be. So the liberation of the goddess for me is the liberation of life force that is the active life-giving principle within us. And when it is liberated, we become instantly magnetic. We're like charged up. And we're calling for the electric nature of life. People who are not charged through their own awakened magnetic nature, they're not calling forth the aspect that's electric. And the electric universe, as you know now, this new principle and model of the universe, instead of the old outdated one, is truly coming to the forefront, which is great. Because the more we understand the higher principles of life and how this liquid plasma moves through this surges of electric bolts, again, movement there, and learn how to transmit that through our own bodies, because this is like a natural remedy. Everything that is natural to us, that is a part of that which was that almost like that liquid plasma that moved into life and created or co-created all that makes us as organic beings. Because we literally have to wake up to one simple fact: we're the offspring of the Most High, which is the principle of life. It's not a certain race that's chosen. It is just the highest principle of life. That is what the Most High means. And second of all, we are really organic beings. We're not artificial. Therefore, we have to release that which we think is our nature, but is not. And third, we're not really vile creatures, but the programs that were a part of this design were. And that's why to wake up to that, not just the pleasant parts of the story as an allegory and myth, we have to do the work. It's not easy, but I've provided all the keys, the steps, the doorways through my courses, but specifically that one which I've freely shared, the Mastery of Inception and Illumined Cognition, as well as all my life force mastery training programs. And I've shared with you a lot of materials which resonated, especially the Wingmakers material. I've given you this, Pleiadian Earth Energy Astrology. This is shared from my Cosmic Companions, Larkma, Pia Orlean, and Colin Bart Smith. And it's beautiful because in this system of astrology, it helps us to align with the universal energies and earth energies that commingle together. And each day, the interactive field of each creates a unique energy blend, which we, of course, are participating with that energy. We're choosing consciously within that energy. And if we're following energy as what is being sold to us from the outside, this is how you work, this is your work, you must work, you're a worker bee, that many hours a day, this is when you can rest, this is when you can go to holiday, right? This is when certain celebrations are, this is when we have football games, this is when people watch, this is when, you know, it's like we're constantly being told what to do and sold these concepts that are unnatural. So to have harmony is not just to be in harmony with the inner self and meditate, but to be in harmony with these greater cycles of life means you're becoming an organic being. Align with that which made you, which is the design within you, and it's the offspring of the galactic core. So to bring the essence of life to the externalization points, right, in this what we call the region, space, galaxy. It's not in a galaxy far, far away like in Star Wars. It's right here. It's not away. It's just like in the back corner, like, oh, there it is. Oh, here I am, right? So this is almost like so important now, because the liberation of the goddess is the work we must each do, and that is the liberating of the life-giving principle. And the moment that principle is awakened within you, all that's inorganic is just like, You just shatter the glass right away, and it's so beautiful. And it is certain work. This is not a path for quick results. People who only seek partial information become fanatically obsessed with it. And, oh, well, we have to get rid of this. Oh, these beings are controlling us. Oh, no. And this is why I usually don't talk about these things so much, because people get so afraid. Probably not you who follow my videos, because you understand from a more synthesized perspective. It's almost like the more lumen you become, the more you oversee life, because you're already life existing in everything. You're just here as one facet of it, experiencing and looking at it from this vantage point, but at the same time you're learning about all the other perspectives, and you're learning how to incorporate them in this unity field, which is you. So you can use this Earth Pleiadian based system to know that you're actually following a constant spiraling process. You're moving through this constant spiraling journey process, and to align your natural rhythms, because this will align you with harmony. To be in harmony is to be aligned with these natural pulses that come as pulsations from the galactic core. What's happening is, because now this awakening is not just awakening the people's minds, the awakening is also a direct translation that is again movement in the galactic core. So just as that principle we talk about as the goddess imbued herself in form, now with all this activities, the cosmic rays, right, all that's coming in, of course it's intense for our bodies. Just this week I could barely do much work. My body was having so many symptoms. But this, in actuality, the bigger picture, it helps to liberate our bodies that have been so much imbued in this system that's false, in this matrix. So this second calling, the second coming, is not a second coming of a certain being. There's many beings who are fully awake, who are already androgynous in their soul nature, who are already as galactic servants to life. We're bringing you these messages here, you know. But the key here is to recognize that the second coming is the calling, right? With all this that occurred as this descent, right? We call it the fall in many cases, but it was just a part of the experiment to experience also this fall and separation, and also a part of this outwardly based programming. Now, to liberate it, because the calling is here and it occurs through all these cosmic ray activities, it's working within our own system. First, it might feel challenging, but it works from within us to liberate the life force, and also the sleeping, right? I call it the tantrika. It moves up and it liberates our inner vortices, so that energy can start spinning in terms of spinning spirals, the dancing spirals. And this goddess Kundalini, or the Kundalini Shakti, once again starts her movement up, this ascent after the descension into this sphere of living. So we're kind of like walking this path of materialization and at the same time dematerialization, but it's not a complete dematerialization. It's kind of like refinement of the way materialization existed in this form. So Earth, yes, is being reworked from within. And we might perceive a lot of that as happening on the outside, and many people seek answers as to what will happen. But you know, in religious terms, this was exactly the reason why they wanted to enslave people this way, to always talk about saviors, as in these deities who are above, right, the chosen ones, and those who have no odds, right? So again, superiority versus inferiority. And also the doomsday scenario, which was always a different date for the ending of the world, or, you know, something of that nature. You know how many stars explode in, become supernova-like, so die and are reborn every day. The number, I think, in terms of the whole year, I've just read this number recently. I have this cosmology feed in my Instagram. So it was about a billion something. I don't know how many billions, but the number was huge. So life is constantly in this universe, right? But here in our galaxy, what happens is also a part of this wholeness of life. Remember, this is just one facet, and yet it's important what plays out in this facet. So again, going back to the nature of the goddess liberation is becoming aware of all these levels that I've described today. And when we say, oh, the goddess is the woman awakened. No, the goddess is the feminine principle awakened in women and man. It's non-gender specific. It is the life-birthing, the life-giving principle. And I don't know how many times I've expressed this, and I still feel people in general don't understand. And now you have these women who are actually starting to act as they're special and goddesses, and they're to be worshipped just because they're women, because they're the goddess. And the goddess, you know, as anything else, can have so many different manifestations. And this lower, more material aspect of knowing what the goddess is, in truth, the goddess is the truth, because Sophia also represents truth. You know, in Roman, I think, religion or mysticism, it was called Veritas. The goddess Veritas is the goddess of truth. There's different names. But vérité, right, of vérité in French, I think, it's all about the truth. So it's the illumined truth. It's the liberated truth from within. So it's not about we being women, now we're special in some way. But we have, as women, maybe a closer connection to life birthing aspect, because we are also physically carrying the womb. So we're just maybe more closely connected, and it's sort of like the gender polarity through which life comes this way. But remember, even Sophia had her counterpart, so that this was all created. So it's beautiful to think of life in those terms and life-giving. And the question I believe here that can be raised is, how can I liberate the essence of life within me? Right? In so many ways. I do it in so many ways, right? Dancing. When I do my cosmic drawings, I don't think about it. Sometimes it's a very simple drawing, and I think of it like, oh, I render it as not that important. But there's a principle, an element of truth in there. And sometimes it's a more cosmic complex drawing, like I did in those 33 cosmic drawings that will one day become available. They're so in the safe spot. It's like they're so sacred to me because I worked so hard on them, and they're going to become its full completion of a creation one day. But up until this point, we have these spirit drawings that you can see on my page. They're beautiful drawings, and you can contemplate on them. But also use sound, work with sound, pure sound. Sound, not just like music you're listening from the outside, but the inner sound. And also the sound you hear in nature. Being outdoors, so important, because in the natural organic systems, you cannot be manipulated. That's why people, even when they're like at home, they have a different tendency than when they go outside, outdoors. They always feel good. Because it's like a natural assistance of the elements, right, to show us that what's our natural state and what's our inorganic state. And yeah, when we talk about these patterns, a lot of these patterns are not self-originating, because the souls were, of course, created to have a certain state of evolution, to evolve through a path. But certain things that occurred as a part of this infusion with the inorganic aspect of life, I'm just going to call it like that. I don't want to be so name specific here, because again, we fall too much into the story rather than the archetypes behind it. But that created a lot of that which is not our true nature as it was designed. It's in our genome, but it's automatic responses, or let's just say reactions, that are a result of this nervous system overlay, right, that came from that inorganic fusion. So yeah, the more organic you become as a being, the more you will awaken yourself. As in many yogic or ancient masters, they talked about this yogic path. Again, it was to do with the liberation, because you know, in these 33 degrees of masonry, right, of initiation, what that means is that 33 degrees, or spine levels, right, in our spine we have these 33 chords, right, 33 points, 33 vertebrae to be specific. So it's all the initiation of the liberation of the goddess as the life-giving principle coming, meeting the brain, the divine mind, illuminating the divine mind, and becoming the divine sun. Those same concepts are everywhere. It's not just a myth of the Jesus born as the Christ, but also the son of Isis and Osiris, which is Horus, again was the divine child. Same thing, right? Then the 3 days after that, resurrection occurs, right? Which is that in what happens in the cavity of the brain. It's a process, and it's a triangulation. For me, it's not the days. It's an allegory. It's the triangulation that must occur, and that what's creating the inner rebirth, the resurrected being within us. And those who do that will eventually lead and assist others along the way. And many of us are already doing that. But it's just going to continue. And that there's also aspects of life that are completely in ignorance of this whole process. So we are now kind of like in the midst of very interesting developments. That's all I will say. So for the reason of honoring the goddess of the life-birthing principle, the feminine principle of life, I'm now doing these new weekly, on Venus days, which are Fridays, I sit down and I channel these divine goddess spirit messages for how to move through and to hold the space from that life birthing giving principle of life. You can join my Patreon page called the Ascension at any time. These are quite long sessions, as well as other things I do there, like readings and courses. So as I've shared before, this month is all about the magnetic nature, how to increase the potential to be naturally magnetic, to be self-sustaining through what truly creates our vortex field. So that's the subject, it's the topic for this month. Beautiful energy. And even when I did my Ascension update, as you know, I do these monthly in-depth spirit updates as well on Patreon, because there's 3 levels again of attunement, how you can access the content. And the whole grid layout which I created was all about the goddess, how she's becoming firm now. It's like she's becoming reestablished in the physical plane. It was all these guardians around her, but it's not like she needs to be guarded anymore, because it was like this natural position of the guardianship. And it was just a beautiful grid. I was just putting all the pieces together in this channeled mode. I'm like, I'm just loving it. So you're welcome to join at any time. I believe this was a special message to include along with the Ascension guidance for this month, because it's like every month I feel a stronger this resurrection of that which is the primal nature of life, the life-giving, the life-birthing, the goddess principle, which is not again to be confused with the woman becoming a goddess and to be worshipped, because there's lower manifestations, you know, that are more tempestuous, that are not truly about that. So in this current, most recent Venus goddess channeled session, we talk a lot about that and how to move away from that which is not truly serving from that life-giving perspective. So you're welcome. And as always, with so much love, Sophia, wisdom, and power, with many blessings of truth. And I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye.